Jeff, welcome to Clienting Live on this Tuesday, February 24th. How the heck are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Guy? Good to have you back. I know you took a little break.
Yes, I am back and excited to be back, getting back in the saddle here, answering emails and doing all the things that you do when you come back from a break. And you know what? I would love to talk to you about today are some recent conversations you've had with lawyers about how they're getting clients and how they're trying to improve how they're getting clients.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to volley off of you that I've been running into more often, we talk to a lot, or I talk to a lot of lawyers who are, they're doing things in digital marketing already, right? They've got all these different kinds of strategies at play. One of the things that I keep hearing is a lack of connected tissue, a lack of connected strategy, a layer across these different things that they're doing, right? So, hey, I'm doing social, I've got an SEO campaign, I've got this kind of content coming in-house, I'm posting some YouTube videos. I can't really tell what's working or how these things are connected together, right? And sometimes it can devolve into everything is thought of as like a direct response, type of channel. So, kind of curious to get your take in terms of, how should they be thinking about these things? And is this a problem that you've also heard and run into before when you've spoken to different attorneys?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is the classic vendor management. I've got all these different people companies doing different things, and no one's really talking to each other. And, it's funny because for so long, early on in Attorney Sync's evolution, we were primarily an SEO shop. I mean, that's what we really focused on doing. And when you really see the impact of how these channels work together, especially, I mean, the truth is this: some legal services consumers will follow a linear journey, right? They don't know any lawyers in their community. Maybe they don't want to ask for a referral because it's a sensitive legal issue. And so they'll go and do a search, car accident lawyer near me, divorce lawyer near me, whatever it might be. And they see local pack listings, and this is the classic search, call, hire paradigm. And that's great. Yeah, I think that represents a diminishing segment of the legal services consumer landscape, but more often you see that there are all sorts of additional channels contributing to their hiring decision. And we even, I think the one that's really been top of mind for me out of the in our research partnership with Near Media is this idea of brands' impact on performance marketing. So even people that are doing car accident lawyer near me search, they disproportionately choose firms that are surfaced in search results that they know or they have an affinity for, or they're familiar with in their local community for a variety of things. Anyway, the point is with all of this is that it's so obvious that at a minimum, I would say, your vendors, if you've got an SEO vendor who's specific to SEO, you got a paid search vendor who's specific to paid search, you got a social media person, that these people are talking to each other and are aligned on how they're, whether it's, simplistically, we'll call it doing attribution, because the problem is that everybody wants to take credit for the client, right?
Right.
The SEO person's like, last click was SEO. They searched, came to you from SEO. And it's like, well, no, they've been following us on social media and interacting with our content over there. Same thing for paid. And anyway, as I typically do, I'm ranting about this. There needs to be some kind of quarterback, whether it's a CMO or a marketing director in-house, or if it's fractional, that's fine too. Or if you're working with an agency and your agency, we call it an integrated account director at Attorney Sync. But someone needs to be like, hey, look, we're working with, we got to get all these channels to work in unison to achieve the business objective that we're trying to achieve. And it can't be an adversarial relationship. And so I think the story that you're telling with the firm that you talked to recently is a common one, right? It's like,
Yeah.
a lot of lawyers are like, I've got all these different people doing stuff. I'm not sure who's doing what. I don't know exactly how this is contributing to my overall marketing game plan. And so that's a very common issue. And again, ultimately, whether it's an in-house person, it's a fractional person, or it's somebody at your agency, I think that consolidating the teams to work together is a really important thing to maximize success, because that's how legal service consumer journeys go.
Right. They're not linear. Do you think there's like a firm size or a certain kind of spend level where the coordination layer, the layer you're talking about, goes from like a nice to have thing to being absolutely essential? Like, do you think about it like that?
Not really, because I'm even a small. I'm always like this. I'm like, you got to have these things in place. You have to have conversations about the who's doing what success looks like. Got to have intake locked down before you really start doing anything, in my opinion. I think the challenge is, and I was recently on the Overruled podcast with David Vicknair of Scott Vicknair. Great firm. And we were talking about this issue of resource deployment at different growth stages, brand versus non-brand. In firms, they'll throw money at stuff. Like they'll be like, I have this short-term thinking where I need to generate cases tomorrow. And so, there's no shortage of direct response performance marketers that'll sell you. They'll sell you Google ads.
Right.
To sell you, Meta ads. And the truth is that in order for that stuff can work, but you're paying a premium for speed. And so anyway, I'm again ranting, but to answer your question, even if you're a small firm, that's not a reason not to have somebody who's ultimately accountable for understanding what these different marketing resource deployments are doing. If you're at a small firm, it's likely, if you're a solo, it's the lawyer. But then you've got to know you got to know this stuff if you're going to be the person taking it on. And so that's why there are consultants and fractional people, or maybe you delegate it. Maybe an early hire for you as a marketing director. But I don't think we've just seen this so many times where there's 5 different vendors that are performing different things. No one's talking to each other. They're fighting over the budget. They're fighting over the resource allocation. They're trying to take credit for every single client that comes in. And what ends up happening is you start making really bad decisions about resource deployment because you think one thing is actually driving the business, and it's actually not. And usually it's some combination of things. And so you really have to understand that legal services consumer journey, which requires somebody consolidating and looking at that big picture.
And it doesn't usually work very well if you're just trying to get the vendors to communicate with one another versus that a person that's accountable on top to actually distill what's going on and make changes, or have a good viewpoint on what to do next, right?
I think that's generally true. I mean, look, there are a lot of worthy rivals in our space, and there are a lot of partners that we would work with that I think they come to the table and say, look, let's talk about what our performance metrics are going to be. But for me, it really comes back to one, defining success, and so everybody has to be aligned on what that looks like, and it's a combination of factors, right? Sometimes it's the firms, like, they don't want to share success metrics. Everybody's very reluctant to, talk about like what their cost per case, cost per client, cost per wanted lead is. And certainly doing that in a concerted way across channels with multiple partners with nobody in charge. Like, yeah, it's rare.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way firms can like self-diagnose if this kind of issue is there? Like, are there questions or a few questions that you think that they could ask of themselves to kind of see, do I have a coordination problem or am I actually missing a piece within the marketing? Just because this is a little bit different layer than just a gap in terms of I'm not doing something in this channel.
Yeah, I think it usually comes out by analysis of your intake and CRM data. If you're able to look at, and when I say that, I mean both quantitative and qualitative data. But if you open a file up and you've got, and from the quantitative standpoint, like what that consumer journey looked like did they come to you because they called a Google Business Profile number? Did you ask them how you heard about us? If you look at both of those two things, it usually comes to bear, because this is what you hear, right? Let's just use the example I just gave. They called our Google Business Profile phone number, and it's a dedicated tracking number. And so the local SEO agency is saying, hey, look, local SEO call, local SEO client. And then when in your CRM data, during intake, you said, how did you hear about us? And it's like, oh, my brother who was a former client referred me to you.
Yeah.
Well, is that a local SEO client? Sounds more like a referral to me. Now, again, I don't want to get into the weights and like attribution and last touch and data driven and all this kind of stuff. But usually if you look at it that way, you'll start to see that there's some kind of misalignment problem, because you're just looking at it from a very myopic view of like last click. Now, a couple other questions, like the easy ones for me, and I say this, and I think we're kind of cursed with the knowledge of having done this for so long, but at a minimum, if you're not talking in the language of business, you're not talking about things like clients by source, consultations by source, wanted leads by source. I think in the prep for this conversation, you had mentioned that a recent prospect was talking about they had someone running meta ads for them, and they had no idea what it's doing. Like if you
Right.
you haven't, that to me is you haven't defined success, and so you don't know. You're just like, I don't know. They're sending me these reports. I'm getting like impression reports. I'm getting spend reports and maybe cost per click reports, but all that stuff, like, it doesn't have any value from a business perspective. So if you're not able to connect it back to consultations, wanted leads, and clients, like that's the starting point, I think.
It's hard sometimes using that example though, because there's a wanting to do direct response attribution in every channel, right? So it's sort of like understanding, well, what is the point of this particular channel, right? Like in some cases, yes, it's to generate a free consult and get the lead. But when you talk about building brand affinity and getting recognition so that when they do reach a more direct response channel, it converts. How would someone who maybe isn't as deep in the weeds from a legal marketing perspective, like better understand what they're trying to get out of these different channels?
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, every single channel is accountable for driving business. And so I think that the mistake is that when we say attribution, everybody's brain flips to last click direct response. That's the whole problem. Right. But that's not what we're trying to do here. So just a quick simple example is like if you're doing a brand building campaign or an affinity based campaign, maybe you're doing some kind of like local partnership with a local restaurant or something. Well, the attribution is going to take place when that contact who has, they've seen you at the local community event, and they signed up to win a contest or to enter whatever the giveaway is. So that their contact information is now in your CRM. And so when they come back around, months later, a year later, and you see them show up as a Google Business Profile call, you can look and see, no, this person has known about, they signed up for the contest a year ago. They came to our, whatever event that you've got going on. They've engaged with us in other ways. Maybe they subscribed to some other content thing or downloaded some lead magnet or got on an email nurture campaign. And so you're not looking for a one-for-one, like, hey, they called from this source and that's it. It's trying to zoom out and understand their entire journey with the data points that you have available. And on top of that, the qualitative question of How did you hear about us? Who do we
Right.
thank for the referral? How did you get our phone number? Like, and when you combine those, you get a much richer sense. And again, the whole point of this is not to do this a one for one. Like, we know that there's going to be all sorts of situations where prospects are going to say either, their qualitative answer isn't going to be very helpful. You're not going to know in detail. And the quantitative breaks because, someone did research on ChatGPT. There's no analytics data for that. And they came over to Google and did a search for you. But then in their qualitative, they say ChatGPT. The point here is that you're trying to get directional trends and you're trying to see if your marketing resource deployment of both time and money is contributing to your new business on an all-in basis, not just like, people get so hyper-focused and obsessed over like who gets credit for what. And that goes back to your initial point, which is when you have a bunch of vendors and they're all trying to take credit for the clients, you're not really good. You're never going to get that full picture because you're not all actually rowing the boat together.
On that point, do you think the vendor model in legal marketing is just fundamentally set up to create the problem? Like, is fragmentation just inevitable if you don't have a coordinator because of the nature of how the agencies are set up?
Yeah, again, I think it kind of depends because there's a handful of partners that we work with that, and we have clients that might be, using us for one particular service and they're using a partner with another particular service. And I think when you've built trust with partners and you've got a good partnership with your client law firm, I think it can work, right? Because it's because you're coming to the table collaboratively. You're not competing, but
right.
I think 80% of the time, I think your insight is correct, is that you are competing and, the budgets are limited. A lot of these firms are undercapitalized as it is. And so if a vendor can try to demonstrate that their activity is, driving new business, they're going to try to take more budget and say, don't do so-and-so because it's not working. And the one, and Gary Sardner brings this up all the time from ROI 360, he's a radio guy. And so the digital people will say, show me the ROI on radio. And so then the firm will ultimately conclude, radio is not generating any business for us. So they'll turn off radio. And guess what happens? All of the digital performance drops because it was actually radio that was driving, those quote unquote SEO leads, which were they're really just brand leads. They're people searching on brand. And so
you've pressed on that before. Yeah. Like making sure you understand what's coming in through brand versus like the unbrand instead of just a giant bucket of like traffic.
Yeah. And this is the other thing too. And this came up on the Overruled podcast again, is like, it's always a mix. Firms, they get, and I'm sure you hear this, but like people will come to us and they'll say, I want SEO. And you're like, all right, well, let's talk about more generally, like, what's your marketing game plan? Like, how are you deployed against, are you doing any traditional media? Are you doing anything else? And they're so fixated on talking to you about the thing that they came in for. They don't even want to have those conversations. So I think that's really the main source of it is that the law firm consumer of consuming vendor relationships is driving the conversation versus vice versa, which is if you have a trusted advisor, whether they're single channel or they're an in-house person or they're omni-channel or whatever they are, you've got to be looking at it from the bigger picture and recognize that there's limitations to, any kind of attribution model, but specifically if you're talking about something as limited as, direct response and last click. And again, digital marketing agencies, digital marketing people have been training people for years. We say all this like, well, we've answered John Wanamaker's riddle. We can actually tell you exactly where your money is being spent. And it's like, not really, because all of these legal services consumer journeys that aren't linear, you're not talking about those at all. Like you're literally just looking at what's the last action this person took before they called us. And that is a very small window of how that person actually found your firm most of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Run into that often when I'm talking to them. If you could sit on a firm's next marketing meeting and ask them a question that you think would help expose if they have this problem? Can you think what that might be?
I mean, I keep coming back to the same thing. I don't want to be a broken record here, but I keep coming back to the same thing, which is show me your all-in marketing plan. Show me, take your full budget, time and money, and show me where those resources are being deployed, and show me how we're holding each of those resources accountable and how we're defining success for them. And so maybe that's
KPIs for each resource, or for each channel or resource.
Well, not necessarily, because so when you say KPIs, you're already walking down the path that there's like, you're only going to focus on like cost per client for this one channel.
Yeah, but you're assuming that in that response that the KPI has to be like this business focused or like case focused.
I do think it has to be that. I think you have to be like, it's not looking at individual KPIs on a channel by channel basis, but you need to see these channels or these marketing resource deployments showing up in consumer journeys. And so I would be like this: show me all your clients, and let's look at the full client, as much data as you have on those client journeys across channel, and let's see if you're seeing contributions. Because again, this happens, right? Like people will say, I've known about you. How'd you hear about us? Oh, I've known about you for years, right? I've seen your TV commercials for years, even for traditional media, right? I've heard your radio ads for years. And so again, I'm not looking for a one-for-one KPI. I'm not looking for like, show me your cost per client from organic, your cost per client from paid. I'm saying, let's look at all of your data. So I'm trying to answer your question of like, what would I ask? I'd be like, let me look at all of your data, your full marketing game plan, your full marketing resource deployment, and give me all the data that you have on that. And again, I bet you're going to say, a lot of firms, they don't have any data at all.
I do run into that a lot. Even substantial firms. No, we don't really have a CRM that we're tracking this in. And
so let me tell you, when they say that, now I know you have the exact problem that we're talking about, right? There's no way. I don't care if you're a CMO or a marketing director or you're a firm working with multiple vendors. If your answer is to those questions like, I don't have any data, well, you're describing the very problem. So what do you fall back on? Leading indicators. And so what are you can talk about leading indicators. Leading indicators of SEO, like we're seeing some traffic, we're seeing some growth in, if you've got call tracking numbers in place, we're seeing some growth in phone calls, we're seeing some growth in average positions for GBP profiles that are tagged with UTM parameters. But all of that stuff, it's all leading indicators. It's not, you can't pay the bills with any of it.
How do you think about, one of the things that I've run into is we've gotten access to a firm's data. So they're capturing it, right? They're making decisions based on it. And when we unpack it, you realize it's a lot of garbage data or garbage in, garbage out data. Are there things a firm or someone in the position could do to help understand and make sure that they're making decisions around the good data versus bad? In other words, are there patterns or audits or something where you would say, make sure these components are in place from your data infrastructure standpoint to know that you're making decisions based on the good data?
That's a great question. I think that the key for me, the thing that we look for is, are you accurately connecting back wanted leads and clients to the sources that you have data for? So trying to think of an example of this, but a lot of firms will say, do you have conversion data in place? We're like, yeah, like we've got pixels fire, we got Google Ads pixel fires. And I'm like, a pixel fire is not connected to a wanted lead or a client. It could literally be anything. It could be anything from a bot. It could be a competitor clicking an ad and filling out a form.
Just in case that doesn't make sense, when you say pixel fire, what do you mean when you say pixel fire?
So marketers will put tracking code on websites that send information to analytics or to the ad platforms to say a conversion happened.
Okay.
and they're defining conversion by a form was filled out, or if you've got call tracking that a phone call was made. But form fills and phone calls are not the same as wanted leads and clients. And so, that's a big sign of a data problem. The other one that we get is there's a lot of misconfiguration going on where so people think they've got a data infrastructure in place, but it's actually, maybe pages are dropping analytics code, or maybe you've got some kind of spam problem. And so again, we've gone from this place of like, we have no data. And then people started to wise up, and they're like, all right, we need to get our data warehouse and infrastructure in order. So they have some data, but a lot of times it's not great. And so and this is the thing I always reflect on, which is unfortunate, but it's worse to have garbage data than it is to have no data, because now you have more confidence.
I was just going to say, you're confidently marching in the wrong direction.
Right. Whereas if you didn't have any data, you might be like, I don't know if this is working. Now you're like, I know it's working, and it's not. And so, and that's another thing too. That's a big source of frustration for a lot of these firms, because they're like, this is another story that we keep hearing, but my marketing agency is telling me everything's going great. All the we see a lot of these, we probably talked about this last time too, but you see a lot of these like third-party tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush charts, or, even the local pack grid trackers. And the marketing agency is like, yep, everything's working. And the firm's like, the phone's we're not opening more files. We're not talking to more qualified consults. Like, what's going on? And so that's one thing that we see all the time. And so anyway, the long-winded way of saying the best way to answer that question is if something doesn't feel right. Like if you're getting positive feedback from your vendor, your marketing agency, or even your in-house people, but you're not seeing that matriculate into open case files, there's probably something wrong with at least the way that you're looking at the data, if not, just a garbage data problem altogether.
In that situation, step into the shoes, if that was your firm, would you look to like an outside person, vendor, someone to have a different set of eyes on that versus kind of directing the same, people accountable to go in and check it out again? Like, how would you go about trying to at least approach that problem?
Yeah, totally. I'm always for getting a second opinion. Just like we talk about with doctors or other professional services, you can't. You need some kind of independent party. Maybe it's a fractional CMO or someone to do an audit. Again, I think back to the whole genesis of this conversation. It really should be your in-house person, like, because your in-house person's ultimately accountable. They're sitting on the same side of the table as you. Unfortunately, a lot of times, that's the whole point. Like the CMO is like, well, I hired these people to be my eyes and ears, and they can't be your eyes and ears if they're trying to take credit for everything. And so you've got no other choice but then to get a second opinion from somebody else. But again, my whole thing is this: I'm always like, the more eyeballs on something, the more transparency, the better, right? Like if you have a good relationship with your in-house team and your vendor partner, you should be able to have a conversation with like, hey, we're getting a second set of eyes on this, and people should be like, okay, great. But and I'll tell you this, because we've been in those situations. Just make sure you're talking apples to apples, because remember, most of these, we see it all the time, is that someone will send like, I'm going to pick on Bird Eye for a second, but they'll send this like, hey, your visibility is, your citations are all broken, and you ranked an F on our tool. Well, that's all BS. Like, you got to be aligned on like, okay, I'm actually hiring you to take a look at this and give me an honest assessment. But let's tie it all the way back to the data that we actually have, which is actually open files. And so that's what I always think about. I'm like, the truth is always in retainers.
Yeah.
Like the retainers are retainer. If you got a client, it's a real person. It's just a matter of understanding how that person found you and then working your way back. Like, you can't fake that. You
Yeah.
can't fake wanted leads. You can't, if it's actually, unfortunately, there's at least a handful of situations where I've heard people faking wanted leads, which is really bad and fraudulent and should be subject to lawsuits. But for the most part, you can't really fake wanted leads. You can fake visibility, you can fake traffic, you can fake a lot of these other you can fake follower counts, you can fake engagement, but you really can't fake wanted leads, consultations, and clients. And so I always start with those numbers you should have a place that those are the source of truth, and then try to get as much data as you can to work your way back and have somebody else vet it. But I don't know, like, I think most of the time it's not even someone trying to be unscrupulous about it. A lot of times it's just like, they just do what they do. Like, this is the process.
They're in their own silo. Yeah.
Yeah. This is what we do. We do Facebook ads. And so this is what we report on from Facebook. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's like, well, assuming that you're actually capturing clients, at a minimum, you're capturing last click direct response clients for a direct response campaign. So you should be able to say, okay, we spent this money on Facebook ads. It generated this many wanted leads, generate this many consultations, this many clients. But again, even if you do that, you're still only looking at a very small piece of the pie. But I guess that would be the kind of MVP for betting whether or not. Now, if you're just getting back things like number of impressions, number of clicks, you don't have nearly enough to be able to make any kind of informed decision.
Yeah. I'd make one other point too on the data infrastructure you'd brought up, just that you definitely want to be conscientious that someone's coming in to try to solve that problem on your behalf versus there's a lot of sales techniques. I've been on both sides of this where it's just coming in to try to displace someone. Right. And not necessarily that it's like bad or wrong info per se, but there's a different alignment in terms of what they're trying to solve with that, which is to get your business in another way versus I really need to understand how my data infrastructure is set up so that I can make sure that then I'm making a series of good decisions after that because I have confidence in the data. I'd just say to be mindful of that because there's a lot of snake oil in the industry, et cetera.
But that's my point though, is like they can't fake that. They can come in and say whatever they want. Think about it in the context of SEO, right? So someone comes in and they're like, we ran an analysis of your website and there's a your H1 tag isn't properly coded or whatever, and so you should fire your SEO agency immediately. And my answer to that is like, so what? Like if you're not telling me that if this second set of eyes isn't telling me something like, they are misleading you about your wanted leads and your clients. Like all this other technical mumbo jumbo that people send out to try to like win business. I'm like, you have, in my opinion, if you lose because of that, and frankly, I'll tell you, we've lost to Bird Eye. I can think of a specific client. Bird Eye sent their thing and it was like, your, blah, blah, blah citations are wrong. And it was early on in the relationship and we hadn't established enough trust. And so, our client was persuaded by that. But to me, that's a lack of, that's something that we needed to improve upon and to be able to say, hey, look, this is why that report that you're getting is really worthless. And it takes time to build that trust. So, but I don't fear that. I'm like, bring it. If you think that there's garbage data, like that's the whole point. We have to be accountable for making sure that the data infrastructure that we're reporting on is sound.
Absolutely.
My 2 cents on that.
Good stuff.
Yeah. The other thing too, is we were prepping for this, that I think goes to this conversation of like multi-vendor and especially in the, in this world of AIOs and AI mode and ChatGPT and zero click. And I was recently watching this conversation. The Near Media guys had Rand Fishkin on their Near Memo. I would encourage folks to go check that conversation out if you haven't. But Rand at SparkToro has been doing a lot of research, and he's really been critical a lot of the AI rank tracking companies. Right. So, and again, we've all been doing this long enough it's not a surprise. Like, this is the new shiny object, is like, you got to do rank tracking. And, in defense, like, this is one way that agencies try to demonstrate value, is that we improve your visibility in whatever surface it is, whether it's search or an AI or whatever it is. So like, there's some reason this is happening, but the problem is that, especially in the legal context, these law firms struggle enough with like some of the basics on marketing. And then so these companies come in and they say, look, how are you going to, so they're like, all right, Guy and Jeff, we heard you. We're going to try to define success, and we're going to define success through, visibility tracking or rank tracking in AI and all this kind of stuff. And there's some fundamental flaws with that line of thinking. And I don't even want to focus on the user behavior changes that we're seeing in terms of like, the way that people prompt ChatGPT and even the emerging search queries that are going on in Google. And I think that we're going to see an evolution of that. Let's put all that aside.
Conversational nature.
Yeah. Let's just put that aside for a second. That's a huge thing, but let's just assume everybody's still searching the same way, which they're not, but let's just assume they are. Even if you just took the same car accident lawyer near me, divorce lawyer near me queries, and you do searches or prompts on these tools, there's more variability there than, certainly way more than there's ever been historically in search. And so anyway, Rand is always, he's been challenging these visibility trackers, the AI rank trackers. And again, go check out the full thing. And I'm just paraphrasing, and I'm only catching a couple of sub points here. But one of the things that got me thinking in the context of like the multi-vendor relationship is that this amount of variability in these tools. And so I think he used an example of like Volvo dealers in LA, and there's like 9 Volvo dealers. And he's like, look, we did research. I think he had like 600 people that would do a prompt, then they would share what they, what were the responses to the prompt. And, he's still stood by the like AI visibility rank tracking I think he said baloney, to use his word, because there's so much, even of those 9 Volvo dealers in LA, it's every time you prompt, you're getting a different order of a certain percentage of those dealerships. Now, the AI visibility people might be like, well, at least you're showing like the percentage of time that your brand appears in that,
just impressions overall that you showed.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, and I think Rand conceded that if you were like, I'm tracking the, call it share of voice of appearing in a response, like you could do that, and it with some consistency. And then David Mim made this great point. He's like, do you think though that has anything to do with there's really only 9 Volvo dealers in the LA area? What happens if you're like in the personal injury space in a major market? Do personal injury in LA, and there's hundreds of law firms.
You get all kinds of different responses, time in, time out. Yeah.
And so that's the point, is that when you're in a space that has that many businesses, the variability is, significantly higher. And even on Google, where they ground it in search results, so there's going to be, I think there's going to be slightly less variability. Still, though, even anecdotally from what we've seen, you get so much variability, not just in the firms that are listed. Sometimes you just get a text list of firms. Sometimes you get Google business profiles. Sometimes you get these like comparison charts. Yeah. And so it's not just so, and again, I just totally put the user behavior issue aside for a second. That's a huge issue. Then on top of it, you have variability even within the layout. So if you got a list of lawyers, that list is constantly changing. And then you have a variability in the layouts themselves. And then don't forget, as you already alluded to, it's not just a single prompt. Like it's the follow-ups and the
refinement, totally
refinement, and the machine is guiding you in your journey of refinement. So it'll say like,
would you like me to? Yeah.
Yes. and it'll do things like could you clarify which of these things is most important to you? Like, is it trial experience, or is it, experience with this specific type of case, or is it years in practice? And that's why, again, like, not to keep plugging for the Near Media stuff, but I think one of the things that's been so illuminating is to actually watch people when they're interfacing with search, AI mode, AIOs, ChatGPT, and then hearing them talk about what they're seeing and what's important to them and why they made the decision and which firm they would choose on that page. Because guess what? That informs your marketing strategy. It informs your messaging. It informs what should be an ad copy. I mean, I can't tell you, we just had this big conversation about pricing, but like, every single personal injury law firm that you can see says free consultation, and different ones will say things around like no fees if we don't win and that kind of stuff. But the lack of clarity on pricing in personal injury is like really profound. And so that's something that we talk about a lot, but like that's a huge competitive insight in terms of messaging and in educating consumers. Same thing with the location stuff, and again, this is proprietary research, so I can't go too deep, but there's a huge disconnect between how lawyers think about their target market and what the target audience thinks of law firms in the context of location and locality. And so again, just a little nugget there, but that's a big thing in terms of messaging.
It really emphasizes you better have positioning and lean into it, right? Because that, the way you just described that, people are interacting and asking and getting refined down, like trying to be all of it for everybody all the time. You're going to get lost in the in the weeds of all that stuff. You got to be speaking to someone and then lean into that.
Well, and again, this is like marketing 101 stuff, but like just showing up on a page with a bunch of other lawyers, it's not helping your cause. Like it's not about, like, it's not just about being visible. It's about being chosen, right? Like you got to go from, and we talk about this in the context of reviews, right? You can show up in local pack results or AI results all you want, but if there's not something compelling about your firm there, you're not going to get chosen. And your agency is going to be slapping high fives because you showed up.
Right.
Your visibility score is your 80% AI visibility score. And it's like, so what?
So what? If you get disqualified, even though you were there, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you don't get chosen, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, totally.
So what else have you been talking about with lawyers?
What else have we been talking about? That was one of the big ones for my conversations this week.
So vendor management is when we legal marketing, that was a big theme too, is and we'll plug Lunch Hour Legal Marketing 2026, which is in Nashville, August 11th through 13th. If you're an in-house marketer, please join us there. But this is a very significant pain point for in-house marketers, is all this vendor management, because again, like, and most CMOs and marketing directors, they're big picture, they're focused on local, they're doing community. A lot of them are involved in the brand building. And so, they hire vendors for a variety of sorts to do advertising or SEO or media management or whatever it is. And they're like, I know I need these things, but I'm not really equipped to be able to understand how they're all working together. And so you get this silo problem, and then you got finger pointing, and we've been in those rooms, and it's frustrating for folks.
Frustrating. There's definitely more of an appetite for. I'm looking for agencies, right, that can handle a lot more of these things, so that I know that there's coordination happening instead of just trying to add a layer to like manage the whole thing. So that's some of the feedback on the ground that I've gotten from different attorneys that I've talked to. Yeah,
and I think there's definitely been an evolution with law firms in their sophistication, which I think is, it's been very positive to watch. I always get frustrated because we've been spending all these years trying to educate lawyers about a lot of this stuff. But in their defense, they're like, but a lot of firms, especially smaller firms, they're like, I'm spending my time practicing law, and I'm trying to deliver great experiences to clients. I need whether it's an in-house director or a vendor that I can trust. And it's very hard for them to delineate trustworthiness in this context because they're getting these reports. And again, I think, to bring this conversation full circle, the thing that I would be looking for is that, does the sentiment of your partner match what's going on with your financials and your client acquisition and your actual retainers? And if there's a disparity there, especially over time, that's when I would start asking questions, getting second opinions, because it's probably you're at least being misled about what's actually going on.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, Guy.
Jeff, a pleasure. And for folks that catch this on the various socials that we broadcast to, join us next time for Clienting Live or I shouldn't say every, because last week we didn't do it, but mostly every Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And again, these are live streams. So if you show up at 1 p.m. and you got a question, you can drop a question, or you can send us questions in advance for us to discuss. If you'd like us to take a look at a specific issue, we'd love to diagnose or cover specific topics that are top of mind for you.
Absolutely.
Until next time, Guy and Jeff for Clienting, powered by Attorney Sync.
Thanks.